stand and sing with joy, to sing and dance with joy. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, good, because that's what we're supposed to do. Even Doug mentioned the troubling times that we're in now. I guess I could use this. And I'm going to talk to you tonight also about some of the troubling things in our state. But the tambourine was used in the scripture as a symbol of being able to, that what God wants us to do in spite of the troubling times, no matter where we're at in the timeline of mankind, that our responsibility is to continue to look to God and have joy, to sing and dance with joy, with what God has in plan for humanity. In fact, I'm going to read one of the scriptures. Talks about in the book of Genesis, it says, "Why did you secretly flee from me, deceive me, and not tell me? I would have sent you away with joy and singing, with tambourines and lyres." Genesis 31:27. So in spite of the challenges that we're having in our country, in our world, and in our state today, I challenge you, we need to recognize the threat that is at our doorstep, but we also need to recognize and appreciate that God is in control, and that we also have a responsibility to play our part in making sure that we stand up for the right principles, and we fight for the blessings that we have as being Americans. Amen? Okay, I'm going to scoot this back. So,
I moved back.
okay, thanks. I did bring some material, so I thought it'd be useful to keep it there, but I don't like to be like on either side, this side or that side. So tonight, I thank you so much for inviting me to join you this evening, and I cannot tell you how awesome it is to be back home in Idaho Falls. And I did just drive back from Boise today. As many of you know, there was an extraordinary session that was called by the governor, and that happened today. So I was already in Boise for a couple days, but I had already committed to being with you tonight weeks ago before the governor made his proclamation. So I was in Boise till 3, got in the car. Fortunately, my husband was with me. He drove me to Boise and back from Boise, and that was really nice because normally I'm just on the road on my own, and so it was kind of nice to have him be with me. But tonight I want to share with you, I'm just going to speak to you from my heart. I want to share with you some of the experiences that I had as a candidate for governor. I want to share with you the reasons why I made that decision to run for governor. And then I want to tell you a few stories about my experiences. I want to share with you some of the things that I'm observing in our state, and I continue to see what's happening, and share with you things that I'm going to continue to do as your lieutenant governor, and even beyond that when my term expires at the end of this year. So I'll start with my decision to run for governor. Why did I decide to run for governor of Idaho? And the truth is that it was never my goal in life to become the governor of Idaho. I served in the state legislature for 10 years, and I got reelected easily 5 terms representing Bonneville County. And I was honoring the vote of the people of Idaho who voted for term limits. And I don't believe in career politicians. I think that we all should go serve in whatever capacity we're being called for, and then go back to private life. And so that's what I did. I served my term, came back to Idaho Falls, and was open to, I didn't have a plan. I just thought that if I ever did run for public office again, it would be an interesting experience to having served in the legislative branch of government to then perhaps serve in the executive branch of government. But I did not know what opportunities were going to become available. Of course, when President Trump announced that he was going to run for president, I immediately got interested to get back involved with things, because the things that he was talking about, the broken Washington, D.C., and how the elites in the few square miles down in Washington, D.C., try to dictate what's happening in our lives and in our states. And I saw that a lot of those same things were happening in our own state, in Boise. The special interests and those that had been serving for decades were losing touch with the people of Idaho. So that's what sparked my interest to get back involved in the political process. When I made the decision to run for lieutenant governor, it was because the person who was then the lieutenant governor was going to run for governor. And so it opened up a new seat, and did not have to run against an incumbent. But there were 5 of us that ran in that race. It was a highly competitive race. I ran against my state party chair. There were 2 state senators that were running for that seat, and then a House member. So it was very competitive, and I worked really hard across the state of Idaho, and I listened to the people of Idaho, and I ran on the same message that President Trump won, and that was drain the swamp. And I won on that message. Of course, once I got to Boise, the swamp wasn't too happy that I was there. So it's been an interesting experience for me to serve as your lieutenant governor. Oh, I forgot to mention that this tambourine was given to me by my sweet mother when I was inaugurated as Idaho's first woman lieutenant governor. She gave that to me, and I've had it at my desk all this time. And each time I go back and forth to Boise, I start bringing a few things home with me, and this one was one that came home with me today. So, and I also want to welcome my family from Arizona here. It's really great to have you.
Hello.
So why did I then decide to run for lieutenant governor? For governor, because, again, as I said, it wasn't my ambition in life to become the governor of the state of Idaho. But in March of 2020, when we were all experiencing this COVID virus that was coming into our states, and watching how our current governor was managing, or I would challenge and say mismanaging, the COVID virus in our state, I disagreed with his management style, because he put together a select committee of people to give him advice rather than listening to the people of Idaho. He put these special interests on his advisory committees, the hospital doctors and the lobbyists from the hospital and the big business corporate IACI representation. Yeah, the swamp. He put the swamp on the advisory committee and began making decisions for the citizens of Idaho, which were wrong for the state of Idaho. It's wrong to go out and define a business as being either an essential business or a non-essential business, and therefore all the employees that work in those non-essential businesses are deemed to be non-essential employees. That's wrong. It was wrong for our governor to go in and restrict our ability to worship freely, which is a constitutional right. And I tried very hard to get a response from our Attorney General about whether or not the governor had the right to interfere with our right to freedom of speech and being able to worship freely, and tell us that we couldn't go to church, we couldn't associate. In fact, Idaho was one of the first states in the nation to arrest Idaho citizens for singing songs outside of City Hall. in Moscow, Idaho. Idaho, the reddest state in the nation. It all started here in Idaho under our current governor's mismanagement of our state. And I had just come off of serving on it. He tasked me to serve on this committee to identify efficiencies in government, because God didn't necessarily give me the gift of gab, but he did make me a really good bean counter. So he tasked me with the job of trying to find efficiencies throughout government, state government. And one of the things that we identified was that, wow, in 2019 our unemployment levels were record low levels of unemployment. People weren't needing the services, and we had these big fancy buildings for the Department of Labor all over the state. So what we did is we started consolidating these offices and brought other agencies into some of these beautiful buildings, and then we had a lot of the people working remotely from their cars even to provide the service, but it just wasn't really necessary because we had a great booming economy. Well, along comes COVID, and along comes Mr. Little's decision to shut down our state, and we went from having record low levels of unemployment to record high levels of unemployment. Over 13% unemployment in the state of Idaho. Well, if the governor would have talked to the lieutenant governor, I would have advised him, don't do that. First of all, even if we had to shut businesses down for a little period of time, what a dumb decision to scale down in the Department of Labor and then lay everybody off and have thousands and thousands of people suddenly unemployed that could not get through the Department of Labor that were beginning to file unemployment insurance claims. And so people went for 13, 14, 16 weeks, literally, without any kind of substance coming in. At the time, the federal government was then starting to pump a lot of money out there and even giving excess money for unemployment claims, but people couldn't get through. And so in my office, we dedicated so much time to try to help mitigate some of these claims from the citizens all over the state of Idaho, these people whose pleas were being ignored by the governor's office and by the Department of Labor. They just could not handle what was happening. So complete lack of, complete, what I would say, mismanagement of how to deal with COVID in our state. And the governor, when he made that decision, I had actually, when the governor issued his stay-at-home healthy order and ordered everyone to stay home, shut businesses down, told us we couldn't go to church, we couldn't socialize, our kids couldn't go to school. 2 days before he issued that executive order, I was talking to him on the phone, and he made no mention of that to me, your lieutenant governor, the second in command, no mention to me what he was about to do within the next 2 days. And in fact, he was kind of joking about, because the Boise mayor had just shut down all the downtown Boise restaurants and bars, and Mr. Little was just kind of joking about how, well, that's not going to do any good. Those people are just going to go across and go to restaurants in Garden City right next door. He said that to me on the phone, and then 2 days later, called me up 30 minutes before he was making his announcement to tell me that he was going to shut down the state. And he went to the Gowan Field where our National Guard is, and he had the Adjutant General next to him and all these military guys, and he declared that Idaho was in an extreme level of emergency and declared the extreme emergency under the section of code that relates to martial law. And that's why he had all the military people standing around him. No mention to other constitutional officers, legislative leadership about what he was doing, listening to the select group of people. So I could not just, immediately his interference in our basic constitutional rights, our right to worship freely, our right to provide for our families, and operate our businesses were interfered with. And to me, I swear my oath to the Constitution, and when our constitutional rights were being violated, that was the first thing that really started bothering me. And I started speaking out against these decisions. I did a poll on my Facebook page. How many of you approve or disapprove of the governor's decision? And that didn't make him too happy either. And then I stood in support of a lot of small businesses. The one up in North Idaho, Hardware Brewing, that finally they just decided, up in Kendrick, Idaho, they just decided, we've got to open up, because she had her electric bills that were coming due, and it was in the middle of the winter, and she said, I just got to open back up, and I'd like you to be there at my grand opening. And I said, well, I talked to my family, and they said, well, you know that's not going to make the governor too happy, don't you? Have the lieutenant governor go up there and support these people that are violating his order. And I said, yeah, I know. And I told the owner, I told her that about my reservation, and that I didn't want a negative consequence to go to her because of me. But she said, because of me being there, that she might be punished even more severely by the governor because I was there. But she said, well, I'd like you to be there, but whether or not you come up, I'm still going to open up. So I said, okay, I'm going up there. And we were featured. There was a news story on Fox News, and our governor in Ruby Red, Idaho, was featured on national news about going after, shutting down these small businesses and going after them with the Idaho State Police. So these basic violations of our constitutional rights is where it all started for me. And then just the difference of management style as we progressed through that year. And I was listening. I was the only constitutional officer in the state of Idaho that kept my office door open during COVID during that year. And so I heard from thousands of Idahoans. I did my best to support them at various rallies. We had a mask burning rally that I dared to participate in, and we threw masks into the garbage can and they lit up on fire, and that went viral also. We actually had a virtual car rally here, and I partnered up with some of the local council members and mayors in this part of the state, just to make people, to try to reach out. We were calling, we were being respectful, but we were begging the governor to open the state back up and get us out of this emergency order that he kept us in for a year and a half, almost 2 years, but to no avail. And so as that year progressed, and I kept hearing from thousands of Idahoans all over the state, doing my best to try to support them and help in any way I could, and I started to have people encouraging me to run for governor. And so it came to that point that I had to make a decision, and the choices before me were, I could either stay where I was at, run for re-election as lieutenant governor, and that's a whole story in itself that I'll save that for another day. Because I was coming into the swamp, and a lot of those people didn't want me to be there. Honestly, some of my experiences in the Senate were not very pleasant. My experiences serving as the president of the Senate were not very pleasant. One of the first things they did was change some of the Senate rules to remove authority from the Senate president. They locked me out of the Senate chambers because they thought that I was going to convene an illegal special legislative session that summer, the summer of 2020, which I was strongly advocating for. And I wrote letters to the governor, please reconvene the legislature for a special session. But the Senate leadership thought that I was going to do that I was going to call the Senate back into order, which I do not have the authority to do that. But they perceived that as a threat, so they locked me out of the Senate chambers and took away my security access to the Senate chambers. And then I had a huge battle with the Senate because they found out that I had a staffer on my payroll that they didn't like. He was a person who was doing, he was a subcontractor, and he did work for me, he did work for other organizations, he did work for other candidates, and he helped me in a technical capacity because he's a very smart web designer and is, really good at what he does. But they didn't like him because he also did some consulting work for the Idaho Freedom Foundation. And so because of that, they cut my budget. And I had to fight to restore my meager budget of $178,000 a year, at a time when they're spending millions and millions of dollars on education and Medicaid and growing government. They wanted to cut the little lieutenant governor's budget of $178,000 when all of the years before that, prior to that, I was willingly going along with the governor's plan to reduce budgets because revenues were coming in low. So that was my reward for being fiscally responsible. Anyways, so that was a choice that was available to me. It wasn't a very favorable choice to think about going back to that. The other choice that was very appealing to me was to just come back to Idaho Falls and just be with my family and run my businesses. And that was a very positive opportunity and was very appealing to me. And then, of course, the other option that people were encouraging me to run for governor, and that was a more difficult decision to come to because most people don't just run against the incumbent, the sitting incumbent governor, especially one who's a member of your same party. But I knew that if I didn't, I didn't want to run for re-election as lieutenant governor, and I could have come home and retired, but I also thought I won't be able to live with myself if I don't at least try to make a stand and fight for the things that we all believe in as principled conservatives and principled citizens of our community and of our state. So with prayer and support from my family, I made that decision to run, and it was a very interesting experience. I thought running for lieutenant governor across the state was one of the most difficult things that I did. And I knew when I made that decision to run for governor that would be even more difficult, probably 10 times more difficult. And in many ways it was. I absolutely loved the traveling across the state and meeting with Idahoans, but I also made a lot of sacrifices that last year on the road. I missed a lot of family events and weddings, anniversaries, birthday parties. I missed out a lot of my personal life, but I did enjoy getting on the road and traveling across the state, our big, beautiful state, and listening to the people of Idaho. That part I really loved a lot. But my campaign was, I was targeted by, we were targeted, not just me, but other conservatives that were running for office were targeted by the left, and we were targeted by special interests here in Idaho, big business, and even some members within my own party. We were targeted and very unfairly attacked. And I was like, I earned the recognition of being the most rogue lieutenant governor in the whole country, because when the governor left the state, and the first opportunity that I had to address some of the pleas and the cries from the people of Idaho, the first executive order that I issued was to prohibit the government from issuing from any kind of a mask mandate, whether it was a city, a county, public health district, or school district. And it's not as if that issue had not been attempted to be dealt with, because during that legislative session, a bill was brought forward, passed the House, but it goes over to the Senate and gets thrown and buried in a drawer. And people were crying for relief from that. Our kids were being forced to be masked up in the classroom, and the thing that finally made me decide to take action was when I showed up on the steps of the Capitol at an anti-mask rally, and it was put on by parents of school children, and I heard from personal experience a lot of the stories and experiences that our kids were having in the classroom. And one little boy came up to me and he said, "Please don't make me wear a mask. My teacher is telling me that if I don't wear my mask, if I don't keep my mask on in the classroom, that I will be responsible for killing her." Yep. The teacher said this to a little boy. Yep. And they were discriminating against the kids in the classroom. There was segregation going on. One of the mothers was talking about how her daughter, who had some autistic challenges, was being beat up, bullied on the playground. The kids would throw rocks at her because she couldn't wear the mask. And I was hearing from these people on the steps of the Capitol, and I decided, okay, the legislature, they tried to address this and it failed. The governor keeps ignoring these pleas, and I couldn't take the hypocrisy anymore as we were traveling across the state at our Lincoln banquets when these politicians, including the governor, would show up. In one particular case in Twin Falls, more than 500 people there that night. All these politicians maskless, while our little kids were being forced to be masked up in the classroom. So the minute the governor left the state of Idaho, and because the Constitution grants all duties and authority to the lieutenant governor when the governor's out of the state, that's when I issued my first executive order to prohibit that. So that really and I was accused, even by some of the candidates that were running on the ticket for Republican nominee, I was accused by many that I did that for political purpose or I was grandstanding. But that's why I wanted to just clear the air with you all and let you know the reasons why I did what I did. And then the second executive order that I issued had to do with the vaccine passport. And that executive order that I issued, the second time he left the state, was to clean up one that he had already issued, because yes, some of the businesses we were starting to see that people were being forced to be vaccinated or take the jab as a condition of employment. And across the state, or across the country, some conservative governors were issuing these things, and actually lawmakers were prohibiting the jab requirement, the mandate. And so he issued an executive order himself that said, it was kind of a milquetoast prohibition. It said, if a citizen comes into one of the state buildings to receive services, that the state government cannot force them to show a proof of vaccination. But what was happening around that time, shortly after that, was the Boise State University began requiring the people who were going in to see the football game that if you didn't show your vaccine card, your proof of vaccination, that you couldn't get into the football game unless you had a negative COVID test to show, which really there's no difference in that. So even our universities were getting around what the governor had written in his executive order. So when he left the state, I just cleaned that one up a little bit. I tightened it up and I just said, yes, it's true, nobody that come into these government agencies have to show a vaccine passport or proof of negative COVID test. So I added that into his existing order, and then I included our public schools and our universities in that.
Yes.
And this was when the governor was out of the state in Texas, and he proclaimed from outside the state. In fact, he issued his own executive order from the state of Texas to undo my executive order. And I was really disappointed to actually find out that our current Secretary of State, Lawrence Denny, who I actually helped get elected as the Speaker of the House, had signed that while the governor was out of the state. And that is so unconstitutional for that to have happened. And so ever since then, he quit sending me letters that he was leaving the state. I haven't had any opportunities to fix anything. But so those were some of the actions that I took, and I wanted the people of Idaho to see. So not only was I committed to protecting the freedoms and the liberties of the individual, but I also, yes, did want people to know the difference between a McGeachin administration and a Little administration. And so, let's see, I think that was all I was going to say about that. But again, it wasn't as if I was just trying to take action without the due process of government, because the legislature had tried to address that as well, to no avail. And some people criticized me that I was acting against, that I wasn't supporting the governor, but again, I remind people that I do not pledge my fealty and oath to the governor or any other politician. It's to our Constitution, and those are the reasons why I did what I did. So it was a challenging campaign. I don't regret it one bit, and I know I had a lot of support from people in this room. It was a good experience, but it was hard being a target of the radical left and some of the things that they accused me of being, and not just myself, but other conservatives on the statewide ticket and local. What I found out is that, not only did we have a lot of, I was going up against a governor that had millions of dollars in his campaign, and I did a fairly good job of raising money, almost $750,000, a lot of support. I had thousands of small donors all across the state, and several of them that going up to the maximum contribution. But it's difficult when you're outspent at 10 to 1. And then I also found out that there was big outside money that was coming into Idaho on some of these races, including mine. And there's an organization that I did some research on, and this is nationwide. They know that they have to get involved in these primary races because they know that that's where the true conservative candidates are running and winning these races. So they get involved and they interfere with these primary races, even with money from outside of Idaho. And so we had a lot of that we were up against as well. But but we did our best, and we don't always have control over the outcome. What we do have control over is our effort. And so I was committed to giving it my best shot, and I believe that I did do that. Of course, there's always different decisions that could be made along the way, but I do not regret that experience. And since that time, it's been so nice to be home in Idaho Falls. And after being on the road for over a year, and we have multiple small businesses, I was only about 6 months behind on compiling financial statements for our businesses. So I've just been focused on getting on top of things and enjoying being at my home and sewing and organizing my cupboards and things like that. But I am still happy and very honored to serve as your Lieutenant Governor. I serve my term out through the remainder of this year. And so now I want to talk to you a little bit about what I am continuing to do and what some of my plans for the future. As you know, I also put together a task force on education, and I'm grateful to have Sonia here, was part of my committee. Because it was 2021 when the legislature came back after that year of that difficult year of COVID, when our kids were being forced to learn from home and parents were peering over their shoulders, looking at the computer, looking at what they were learning in the classroom, and all this stuff about critical race theory and social justice agenda was starting to seep out, and the parents were saying, what is this? What's going on here? And so the legislature had made an attempt to prohibit that in the classroom, but they said critical race theory cannot be taught in the classroom, but critical race theory itself wasn't defined in the statute, and that's one of the problems when you define legislation. Well, when you don't define legislation, then some judge or somebody else comes along and tries to define or divine what the legislature meant. So that was one of the flaws on the bill, and then the bill itself didn't have any teeth to it. So, and they did cut higher education budgets that year, because we found out at Boise State University they were forcing students to go through, it was called the tunnel of shame, that if you were, as part of a class requirement, you had to go through this tunnel of shame, and they would yell things at people, you play the role of being a Native American, and they would yell at the students going through this tunnel and making people feel guilty for who they are. And other things that were happening, I had a student that was a law student that was going to school up at the U of I, and as a condition of his getting credit for his law courses, he was required to attend a panel that was hosted by, I can't think of his name right now, but he's one of the biggest advocates for critical race theory, the teachings of it. And so this University of Idaho law student was being required to attend. Do you remember the name of that? Abram Kendi, yes. He was required, and they told, the school said, we will withhold your credential and your funding if you don't attend this panel. So we knew that it was happening in Idaho, but it was the legislature left and really didn't do what I felt they should have done. So I formed a task force, and I came home that year, Easter Sunday, and my mom said to me, she goes, well, Jan, what's the governor going to do about this critical race theory in Idaho? And I looked at her, I said, nothing. And I got in the car and drove back to Boise, and then I thought about that, and I thought, that's not good enough, because maybe he doesn't want to do something about it, but I can. I'm the lieutenant governor, and I can do my own thing. So I formed this committee. We had representation from all over the state, and we met 4 times. We studied what was happening in our public schools. We studied what was happening in our universities. We tried to get a basic understanding and definition of what it is. We had a number of national speakers testify, and then we had public testimony where we came up with some recommendations. So we made some recommendations to the school board, and it was just a start. And since the election, I have picked up on those committee meetings every 2 weeks. And so not only some of the existing members that are still part of that, we've picked up a couple of new members on the committee, Kurt and Cheryl Tapke. And really appreciate your interest in what's happening and the work that you put in and your participation. They helped us come up with a really awesome link to all of the school districts across Idaho, because I think what is really important, and this is where the encouragement needs to be, is that people are waking up and recognizing the importance of these local offices. And they're running for school board, they're running for library, district trustee, they're running for their community college trustee, even the fire district. So that is so important. Those positions have been ignored for a long time. And so people are becoming very engaged, and that's a positive thing. So I appreciate your involvement as well as the involvement of others. Now, I was in Boise just for a few days this week to have one of these meetings in my office, and we had about 6 people that came and joined the meeting that day. They call themselves the Concerned Citizens of Meridian. And they became very engaged in what was happening at the Meridian library and some of what the legislatures referred to as smut in our library. There was another bill last legislative session that was attempting to address that. Basically, the way our statute says, it says all of this material that is considered harmful and bad for the kids should not be made public, but there's an exception, except for public libraries. So there's an exception in our public library. So that was Wednesday, and some of the materials that these parents brought to me, I'm shocked. I'm really shocked at what's happening. I'm not going to show you these pictures up close, but these are copies of pages from books that our children are accessing. And there was a father from Meridian that his 14-year-old daughter was able to go online through some online subscription and order this book, and it was delivered to their home. And this is pornography that our kids are being exposed to. When you see it with your own eyes, it's shocking at what's happening. And so this too needs to be addressed. And I don't know yet whether these books are available in our school libraries, but I'm going to find out, because this needs to stop. This is more of a threat to our children than social justice ideology and Marxist teachings in our classroom. This is pornography. It's dangerous material that our children are seeing, and you will be shocked when you see these images. So the left, of course, wants to characterize our efforts as being that we want to ban books. No, we're not talking about banning a book, but we're saying this is not appropriate for children to be seen. And I can remember the day that people got upset when you go to the grocery store and the Cosmopolitan magazine was on full display, and people were complaining about some of the images of the women scantily clad on the Cosmopolitan magazine. So what they do, they passed a law that said you can have those magazines, but you got to flip them around. So people don't just see them passing by. And it's still that way, but yet we have this smut in our Idaho libraries. So these are definitely challenging times and difficult times, but we cannot give up, and we cannot allow the left to take control of the narrative, because they try to call us names. They call us Christo-fascists if we believe in God and believe in the Bible and the principles that many of us were taught. They call us Christo-fascists. And that's what they try to do, is they try to dehumanize us, because especially if you're in a elected position, you do not want to be labeled these things. So what happens is we tend to back off from those things and turn a blind eye. But we can't do that anymore. But the good thing is that what I'm seeing across the state of Idaho is thousands of concerned Idaho citizens that are not going to sit by and watch this happen. In fact, we had a prayer rally at the Capitol on Wednesday for the very purpose of praying for the leaders, and especially the lawmakers that were coming to attend the special legislative session. So do not get discouraged, do not give up. It's worth a fight, and every little thing that you do, stand up for Idaho, hosting these Constitution classes, running for office yourself, every little thing that you do does make a difference, and we have a responsibility. We are called to stand up for these things. I'll talk just a little bit about the special session, how that went, and then I'll open up for any questions, and I'm happy to go on as long as you're interested here tonight. But the special session today was called because we do have a surplus, and the governor's plan was to return some of that money to us as taxpayers. It was a rebate, about $500 million of the rebate, of the tax relief came in the form of a rebate on income tax. And it was really, I listened to the public testimony in the committee today, I listened to the debate on the House, I listened to the debate in the Senate, and what was interesting, this was even the chair of the House Tax Committee, he kept on saying $500,000 of money is going to go back to the taxpayers of Idaho. And I'm like, wait a second, that's the chair of the committee. Does he not know it's not $500,000, it's $500 million? But I've found this in my experience serving, that even once as the lieutenant governor, I'm standing, my job is to preside over the Senate and make sure people behave themselves and don't question others' motives or don't say the wrong thing. And this one senator, she did the same thing. She was talking about one of the education bills, and it was something like $48 million that was going, and she said $4.8 million was going to go in, was in this budget bill. And I called up the president, the pro tem, and I said, President pro tem, she just said this, but the bill says that. Should I correct her? He's like, oh, no. You don't need to, it's okay. I think everybody understands. But that's just how it works down there sometimes. I mean, sometimes they literally don't even read the bill. And in the Senate, they even roll their votes because they don't want to get cobbled up in all the minutia of calling a roll call vote, so they roll their votes. But this bill was to give $500 million to the taxpayers in the form of a rebate, and then they took the ongoing income tax reduction from 6% down to 5.8%. That's great. I always support giving money back to the taxpayers, but there was no effort to return money in the form of grocery tax relief or property tax relief, which we're all suffering. So there could have been a lot more done to help taxpayers in Idaho with this excess revenue. And then the part of the bill that was problematic also for many people was that it was going to take, and it really is a result of the Reclaim Idaho initiative to increase taxes and pump more money into education, a system that, I mean, we're seeing more and more evidence, and I've got the scores for Idaho showing that we need to address what's happening in our classrooms and why our kids are not learning. Why are they not at reading level? Why are they not at math level? And why do we not have true school choice like Arizona has in Ruby Red, Idaho? So none of that was addressed in this bill, and there were different reasons to support it or oppose it. And as I said, it was interesting to watch everything happen. It pretty much just sailed on through. I think the Senate finally voted, it approved it, went through the House, only 15 state representatives out of 70 voted against it, and then in the Senate, only one senator voted against it, 1 out of 35. So it's a done deal, but now you're going to get to have another question on your ballot box that says, do you approve or disapprove of this bill that we just passed? No. And so you'll have not only the Proposition 1 on the ballot, but you'll also have that question on your ballot. And a good point was raised by one of the senators saying, I don't know why we have to go to the voters and ask whether they approve or disapprove of the job that we're doing, because that's what the elections are all about, right? Every 2 years. If you're not doing a good job with your district, they can get rid of you. And a number of those that supported the bill are ones that are not going back. And it was interesting to watch some of the pontification that was happening on the floor of both the Senate and the House today. So that's just a little background on what that bill is and does and what it will do. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Just quickly, so I'm going to continue my efforts on the Education Task Force, and we're building consensus with other citizens, other groups, and we have the Carolyn Harrison and her group here, the Idaho Parents for Educational Choice, they're actively engaged in the effort. And so we're building a coalition of support from lawmakers and have some bills that are ready to go for the upcoming legislative session that do deliver true education choice, and other bills that will address some of these concerns. So I'm doing that. I am launching a podcast tomorrow, and I'm going to be doing a podcast on a weekly basis. I switched my campaign website and my Facebook account from Janice for Idaho candidate to Janice McGeachin, America First Warrior. And so I will be launching that podcast tomorrow, and I plan to do it on a weekly basis. And it's been kind of interesting and fun, and I'm going to enjoy interviewing everyday Idahoans. I've already done a few interviews and got some episodes kind of pre-recorded. So that's happening. And then lastly, the effort that I started my second year as Lieutenant Governor, the Capital Clarity, weekly Capital Clarity sessions at the Capitol every Thursday at noon to help educate the Idaho voters and the citizens on legislation, what's happening in your legislature. That will continue, and there's a senator, a co-sponsor in the House, and another group that's committed and wants to carry that on. So that makes me feel really good that thing that I started is going to continue on. So I'm sure there will be lots of opportunities to stay involved as I continue living my life and whatever God has planned for me, even if that means just spending more time at home with my family. I'm perfectly happy with that. But just as you've demonstrated, there's so many ways to get involved and especially work to help our kids make sure that they're learning the right things, because it's worth a fight. And so I applaud you for what you're doing, and I want to encourage you and give you a positive reinforcement that to keep doing what you're doing, because it definitely makes a difference, and we should not become in despair over the things that we see happening in our state and in our country, but we should get involved and do something about it. So, okay. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Does anybody have any questions? We do have some dessert over there, by the way, so wander over there and boy, see all these hands, there's a lot of questions. So let me grab another mic so that we can all hear, and we'll give this to Jan.
That's actually one of the things that I do and really enjoy, is kind of this more town hall, casual opportunity to answer people's questions. So, John, did you have a question?
I do have a question.
We'll start over this way and run this way.
Can you talk to us a little bit about Proposition 1, please?
Yes, so Proposition 1 was this group, Reclaim Idaho, and it's the same group that collected enough signatures to expand Obamacare in the state of Idaho, but they're doing it with the help of leftist activists that send a lot of money to Idaho to go out and collect these signatures. Their website is full of lies. They did collect over 90,000 signatures to qualify to go on the ballot, but what it does, it proposes to increase income tax rates to almost 11%, which will be equal to tax rates that states like California and Massachusetts have. So we would become one of the highest tax states in the nation, along with California and these other liberal states, and take that money and put it back into the educational system. So it will be on the ballot. Now, I actually wrote a letter, or I sent a message via text to the governor, the Speaker of the House, and the pro tem, and I said, here's an idea. You don't have to call the legislature into session and spend $30,000 a day. If Proposition 1 passes, all you have to do is go back in January and reduce the tax rates back down, because that's exactly what happened in the legislature today. But these tax rebates are going to go into effect immediately. The checks are going to be cut with Brad Little's name on the check, and they're all going to go out right before Election Day.
Oh, how convenient.
So does that answer your question about Prop 1, what it is, what it does?
Somewhat. I guess that's a good general idea.
Okay, their proposal was to raise taxes in order to pump more money into education, but the governor's idea was to reduce taxes and put more money into education. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that it was going to be on the ballot this November.
Yes.
For the voters to approve or disapprove of what they did.
Mm-hmm.
What if the voters disapprove?
It doesn't matter. Yeah. Because, no, seriously, I'm not being facetious, but that's the way the bill is written. It says that these sections of the bill go into effect immediately, and then these sections of the bill go into effect on January 3, which in effect cuts out what Prop 1 does, because Prop 1 is written to go into effect January 1. So if Prop 1 passes, it goes into effect January 1. The way this bill is written, it supersedes the language of the Proposition 1. But that's part of it that goes into effect January 3, and the other part of it goes into effect upon passage, and that's the way the bill is written. So as soon as it receives the governor's signature, it's in effect. So it really doesn't matter whether you say approve or disapprove.
It's
On the
meaningless
ballot.
vote is what they're asking us to do.
What's that?
It's a meaningless vote. They are asking us to vote.
I'm sure that in their minds they're thinking that they want the people of Idaho to approve of what they voted on today, because that's going to give them the direction of how to move forward in appropriating the money that goes into this bucket come January of next year.
Vote no.
Vote no on, you can vote no on that, but for sure vote no on Proposition 1.
Yeah.
And strong leadership would have no problem saying Proposition 1 is bad, vote because it raises our taxes up so high, like California, vote no. But that's not what the current leadership or lack of leadership is willing to say or do. So, but I would just say there's a glimmer of hope that with this money that's going into this bucket, with a whole new slate of lawmakers coming into session next year, especially in the Senate, there might be a glimmer of hope that we could earmark some of that funding for school choice. So that's something to advocate for. Yes. Oh, yes, go ahead.
You said that you are dedicated to upholding the Constitution, and that's where your loyalty is, not to a politician. So twice I had to take the oath of enlistment, where I swore to uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to obey the lawful orders of officers, non-commissioned officers appointed above me. The lawful orders, not the unlawful orders. Do the police that were enforcing the governor's unlawful command or unconstitutional command, don't they take the same oath?
They do.
So the cops are liars.
Well, some of the local police departments and the local sheriff's office were not complying with the governor's orders. And in fact, I interviewed a woman from Canyon County who had her business shut down, and the local police, the city police and the sheriff, they were not coming after her. But the state police, they did.
Police.
But I mean, who gives them, who appoints them?
Well, I realize
It's the
that,
governor.
But I was not required to obey the unlawful orders of officers.
They just don't want to lose their job. They were appointed by the governor, and so they don't want to lose their
So
job.
that's where their loyalty lies,
Yes.
is to their paycheck, not to
Yes.
the Constitution.
Yes.
Or the people alike.
Yes.
Okay?
But we do have some really great constitutional sheriffs across Idaho. Two really awesome ones up in North Idaho. Kootenai County and Bonner County are amazing constitutional sheriffs. We just need to have more of those throughout the state.
Okay.
Yes.
I have a very easy question for you. but it may not be one you want to reply to, which is totally understandable. Are you endorsing anyone for the governor's race?
I've been pondering that, and I'm not prepared to discuss that publicly at this point in time.
So first of all, thank you for everything you do. You're amazing and you're inspiring, and I really agree with you that this problem of pornography is bigger than anything else that we are dealing with in the schools. But I just want you to know what's happening in Blackfoot. So I live in Blackfoot. I'm kind of organizing people there. We've got a list of the books that we're aware of that are really problematic. And then we are letting people pick a place where they want to go. The public library, their school library, wherever, all volunteers are going in to look for these books and try to get them out. And I will tell you, I have a little grandson that loves to read, and he's 8 years old. And I'm so glad I didn't take him with me to the library, because they had one of those books with terrible pictures on the bottom shelf in the juvenile section in Blackfoot.
Was it the Blackfoot Public Library?
Library.
Yeah, it's shocking what's happening in our state and in our nation, and it needs to stop.
Janice, Janice, you were talking about they giving funds to help squash some of the good candidates and the conservative candidates. Who's they?
Well, there were different special interest groups, or these PACs, that I can think of three. One of them was called Take Back Idaho. That was one that was in-state, and it was comprised of a few so-called Republicans that were attacking me. They came after Priscilla Giddings, they came after Dorothy Moon, and a lot of the local races that were lost. They went after them too. There was one called Defend and Protect Idaho. They also were organized inside the state, but some of these outside PACs were sending them hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then there was another one that made at least a $500,000 contribution to one of these PACs that was, I can't remember the name of it, but Stand Up for America or Unite America. But you go to their website, and that's what they say, that our stated goal is to interfere with these primaries, to get these conservatives, prevent them from being elected.
The second question would be, there are documents available in the public eye when you're aware of them that our dictator Little was basically taking funds, and the timing of some of the events that you were trying to overturn were quite interesting, and they were based upon federal funds or funds that were given to him that he had to, I'll call it, obey, right? So can you comment on that?
Yes. So Governor Little signed, it was called a FEMA agreement that was specific to the COVID emergency. And so the state CEO signed this agreement with the federal government to bring all this money in through this FEMA agreement. And that's what he kept us in for almost 2 full years, and that's how all of this money was flowing into our state. A lot of the money that was being used at the hospitals for these vaccination mandates was coming through that source, and there was a lot of money for the extended unemployment benefits. There was a lot of money, and Medicaid. One of the conditions, if you kept taking this money, that even if you found that there were some people that were no longer eligible for Medicaid assistance, you couldn't, if you took that money, you couldn't take them off the Medicaid rolls. So we had people that didn't qualify for the program. The program is meant to help lower income families, and so they found out that there were people that didn't qualify for eligibility, and we couldn't do anything about it because of this agreement. Is that some of what you were
That is,
asking about?
it's just really interesting that one person in the entire state can make an agreement that really goes against with what you're saying many of the population doesn't agree with.
Absolutely. And the legislature, they attempted to correct that constitutional balance of power between the executive and the legislative branch of government. And they produced bills to balance that and take away some of that authority from the executive branch. But what happened? He vetoed the bills. And the House was able to override their veto from the governor, but the Senate, when their bill came back vetoed by the governor, 5 of the Republican senators that originally voted for the bill, they switched their vote, and we call them the flip-flop 5, and so they failed to override the governor's veto. So he maintained all of his power that he was claiming for almost 2 full years. And then, again, that's part of the hope that some of us had with the election, that the people of Idaho would speak against that type of dictator, tyrannical rule from this administration. And unfortunately, there still is a lot of people who just listened to what the media had to say, and the lies and the slander, and I was unsuccessful along with some of my conservative colleagues.
Thank you.
Because of that.
I just want to go back to what was mentioned earlier about material that's in the public libraries, and that is everywhere. And when I talked to the, I guess he's the chairman of the library, he said that they don't have any control over what books really come in. Their job is to just put them on the shelves, and it's up to the parents to mitigate, I guess, what their parents see, what their kids see and they don't see. And I says, well, is there something that deems appropriate or rating on these books? He says, no, there's no rating on books. It's just what the library over that section decides to, the employee over that section determines to order into the library. And if you have a complaint against a book, you can come and take it to them and fill out a form, and they'll review it and determine if what they should do with it or not. So my question is, what can we do? What advice would you give to even try to make a difference? Because right now they hold all the power, and they're like, we don't care what you guys say, because we're here for the community, and there's people in the community who want to look at these kinds of books, and your job as a parent is to make sure your kids don't get a hold of them.
No, you don't ever forget that all the power resides in we the people. We have power, the ultimate power. Those library districts are created, it's a legislative bill that creates a library taxing district. And then they have trustees that are elected to serve. These trustees then go and make their own set of bylaws and all. So what this Meridian is doing, they're having a recall of some of those trustees at the Meridian Library District. And some people are getting ready to run for those seats that are coming open next year. The other thing is there's a provision in the statute that you can dissolve these taxing districts. So we need to know that we actually have more power than what many people think we do. We've just been conditioned. I mean, we haven't even, unfortunately, a lot of us have been kind of asleep at the wheel when these things have been being implemented decades ago, silently just creeping in, and they're there, and these bureaucrats have a lot of power, and they like to be dismissive of the people of Idaho, but we have to remember where our power resides. I mean, where our power resides within we the people, that's given to us by our Constitution. And they do have the authority to, all the citizens of Meridian, they weren't asking those trustees to get rid of these books and not put them in the library. They were asking them to put them in age-appropriate sections. Why is that too much to ask? And they refused to do that.
I think it should be in the library though.
Well,
Like that one that you have, it shouldn't even be in the library.
I agree.
Because anybody can have access to that.
It's pornography.
Trash. Yeah, it shouldn't be in the library.
I mean, if I have to even be careful I almost feel like I have to have a police officer standing next to me, to show this, because and we can't disseminate the information or look at it online, because we could be arrested for pornography, child trafficking and pornography. So a lot of counties are, there's a couple counties across the state, and I think Bonneville County is gearing up for these things, but like Kootenai County, they are making a concerted effort to make sure that all of these positions have a candidate that they run for these positions, and they're seeing success for that up in North Idaho. Kootenai County, Bonner County, and I see that this is happening now in Bonneville County. So there is a lot of opportunity to get new people in these positions. And then the other thing I want to just add to, as a resource, which, and yes, I'm affiliated with the Idaho Freedom Foundation. Yes. Good. One of my friends, who's a school teacher, she said, "Are you affiliated with the IFF?" I said, "Yes, I am." I support them financially. I support what they're doing. But they have done a really great job of compiling resources. If you go to their website, idahofreedom.org, there's a link on their website that's, the acronym is LEAD. LEAD, go to that link, and you can pull up every school district in the state of Idaho, and you can see the incidents of Marxist teachings, critical race theory, and social justice agenda that's happening in your community. And they also have some resources of which books are in some of those school libraries. So it's an amazing project. And for all the people that say, give me an example of what is social justice agenda or critical race theory, and they say they don't want to admit that it's real, but you can go to this LEAD link on IFF's website and it'll take you right to it. Just like at Skyline High School, they have an LGBTQ club at Skyline High School. At Thunder Ridge High School here, they're actively displaying the rainbow flag in the classrooms. I think the only appropriate flag to display in the classroom is this one right here.
So,
Yes, sir.
question for you regarding education. Most every major manufacturing facility has a quality control division to make sure that whatever product they are producing is actually fit and does what they manufactured it to do. And it seems like kids are being pumped out of schools that if they were part of a manufacturing facility, they would be pulled off to the side in the quality control. Unfortunately, of course, most public schools today are bastions of Marxism. I'm wondering what, if anything, can be done to restore a level of meritocracy so that the teachers are actually responsible for the students performing well.
Well, I think school choice is a good solution to remedy that, because as a small bit, as a private, being in the private sector, we have to be competitive. If we're not competitive, we're not offering the best product, the best price, the best service, then we're going to go out of business. So a healthy dose of competition into our school system, I think, will help remedy that quite a bit. But we saw under No Child Left Behind was an attempt to score the performance of educators, and that didn't go over very well. It was just another big government program. So I think competition and having parents be involved is a good solution.
I was just wondering in my mind, I don't know the right answer, if you could pursue some kind of criminal charge against librarians that are displaying this material. If I were to take some of those materials and show them to my neighbor's kids, I'm pretty sure the police would come and arrest me. So what's the difference?
Well, you raise a good point there, but the problem is, and that's where we could, if we did have more support from law enforcement and from our leaders in the state, that we could be more aggressive with them and confront them with these things. The problem is that the way the statute is written is that they do have an exemption in the law because they are a public library, and it's specifically exempted in our code. So that's what the bill that passed the House last year with solid support came to the Senate, and the pro tem said that he said he wanted the House to just quit sending all these crazy bills over to the Senate. That bill didn't go anywhere in the Senate, but that's exactly what that bill was attempting to close that loophole.
I'm new to coming to me. I believe in the same things, and I support it, and I'm grateful that you're able to be in the position you are to represent. So I'm not trying to make light of anything. I'm still stuck on who's changing the litter boxes. As a mom, your kid wants to meow at you. You want to do, okay, you go do that, all right. If there is a litter box at the school, maybe that child wouldn't be a cat the next day if they changed the litter box. So I'm just thinking, it's just appalling to me. So I'm not trying to really make it light. I really like. Is that honestly the janitorial's job now?
Well, you raise a legitimate concern, because the more of these things that we do in the classroom, then maybe we need to hire another janitor to go in and change the litter box. All these things work to just increase the cost of education, and instead of getting the money to the teachers, then goes to all of this administrative bureaucracy.
So that's my first question. I didn't expect you to really be able to answer it. My second one is, you have public school system or you have home. Those are only two options for education. Because in my mind, taking the Dental National Board was so archaic that my skill level, I go to take the National Board. I passed one of the 3 tests, 15 years of experience. Radiology, I did not pass it because I wasn't trained in a facility so archaic with a fixer developer. I didn't know why that film was foggy. I didn't know if it had to be hot sensitive, cold sensitive, everything else, okay? So same with the chair side assisting. I wasn't mixing amalgam fillings. I wasn't mixing metals. I wasn't using those instruments. I had no idea what that instrument was called. And so that test, since that I didn't know, it started throwing more questions at you, right? So I personally, 10 years ago, went to the state and said, if you want us to be state certified, you got to have somebody lift your new curriculum. Your test is archaic. Mm-hmm. So in my mind, I'm raising 2 children myself. If our public school system seems to be failing, and we have meetings like this where it's recognition of failing, it's kind of like someone needs to revamp the test. Someone needs to redo it all. So instead of just at home, let them run the public schools how they want to. But maybe there can be another educational curriculum come out that those parents that want to honor the Constitution and implement that, they can. And those that want to be cats and meow can stay at McDonald's farm. They absolutely can. I mean, you can't, it's kind of like a bad marriage. You can't make your ex change. So your house, you can implement certain things, right? If you were to stay in that marriage, you're just going to keep having the same fights, but the result's the same. You just complain about it. But the result is like wah, and they still do it. The only hope I'm really seeing is it's either home or it's public school. But at the same time, the pendulum's clear this way on one and clear this way on the other one. So that there has to be, and is anybody creating an idea for an educational system that is that us parents, using the Constitution, we can choose to not enroll our child into that school. We can enroll them into this school. Are there people that are willing to take that position as a principal, as a vice principal, to create that educational system? And then is there a different curriculum that we're able to teach out of and maybe keep kids busy? Because they're going to find pornography. They're going to find this. I'm telling you right now, my kids didn't find it very young because I have them busy. They were so busy, they slept, they didn't have time to get into things. And so there's just maybe a different way to use the money that the state gives that we can honor what they're doing.
That's called school choice. And educational learning pods is something that we can do on our own. We can all pool our money and hire. This is the concept that these people need to grasp, is that, let's say there's 5 families that want to pool their money and hire a teacher and teach their children. A teacher, if we had a voucher or a tax credit, even up to $5,000, these 10 families could pool their money, have $50,000 to pay a teacher, $50,000. The teacher is going to start out at a wage that's almost double what they get paid in the public school system today, and only have 10 kids in the classroom. It's a win-win situation. If we had, and those pods are happening, it's not a new idea, they're happening in California. The only difference is that the parents are just, it's more designed to work for wealthy families because they are taking their own funds and doing this. But that's what true school choice would provide, something like that.
Well, I know the state's giving, I know that the state, my voice is probably pretty loud, huh? I know the state is recognizing and happy to use funding to go towards that route, because I actually, in my paperwork, I told the state, I bought an LLC, I'm creating my own school. And within my own school, I'm 64 chapters of this curriculum that you'd like me to teach out of, I'm going to use 20 chapters. But I'll teach out of your curriculum. I just didn't find anything useful until chapter 10. And I'm shrinking my program from 10 weeks to 5 weeks. I'm shrinking the tuition to 22 instead of $6,000, because you start dental systems out at $12 an hour. So I know the state does give in. If there's an alternative that says, I want to teach, they tried to shoo me away 10 years ago and say, what are you doing? But I'm telling you right now, I just barely put through my 2nd class, teaching my own curriculum, sending in my own syllabus, and so I know that's such a small level, such a small level. But I know it's possible. I know the state gets discouraged to where, guess what they did last year? They lifted the mandate to even be certified because they didn't want to go rewrite that national test that I was mandating them to do. That if I was going to take my time and talents in teaching a class, then when I have my students go and take the national, they better be able to pass it. And if they can't pass it because I'm not teaching them archaic procedures, then the state has a problem, not me. And they absolutely dropped it last year, and nobody ever thought that would happen. So you know what? On a little small measure, like seriously, so I think that they will. I think that when people start saying, we're just going to yank our kids out of this school over here because we're going to go over here to this school, they're going to go, wait 1 second. Wait a minute.
That's the result we get when we open our eyes and our views to true competition, and doing more to go back to the basics and teach our kids some skills, some livable skills. And that's what I would like to see happen in our state. But we do have charter schools as one form of schools. Some of them are better than others, the charter school system. And then we do have some private schools, but again, there's no taxpayer, it's not even right to say taxpayer dollars, because that's our money. We've been taxed. We pay sales tax, we pay property tax, we pay income tax, and our schools are not free, as it says in the Constitution. 60% of our general fund goes towards public schools. And on our local property tax, a big bulk of what we pay on local property taxes goes to pay the bonds and the supplemental levies. So it's not free. We pay a lot of money for that. It's our money. It's not even right to refer to that as taxpayer dollars being used for parents. It's a better way of saying that we're allowing parents to keep some of their hard-earned tax dollars and educate their child as they see fit.
So in the meantime, for a parent who, for whatever reason, can't get their child out of public school and we haven't got school choice, is it true that a group of, I think it's 25 parents can get together and decide that they want a certain curriculum taught in their public school classroom?
Our laws do provide oversight and involvement by parents in the selection of the curriculum in the school district. Our statutes do provide for that. And so, yes, the answer is yes. Yeah.
But once the curriculum's chosen and passed by the school board, you can't just go in there as easy and change the curriculum out because you get 25 parents who complain about the curriculum, right? Do you have that authority to be like, hey, we got enough people, we want this curriculum after they bought all the books and passed it by the board?
Well, parents have the right to go petition and find out and advocate. But whether the district goes with the parents' advice is a different story. And what we're finding, again, during our studies on the task force, what we found out is that these school districts, the parents would petition the school district to look at the curriculum, and the district would tell the parents that is what they call it, proprietary information, because they were buying the curriculum from these companies, and they said it's proprietary information that we can't give you. That's when it's time to replace those school board trustees.
So I just got a couple comments. When you're talking about the litter box, that could be
Just
solved
telling you, I'm
by,
still stuck on that. I know.
that could be solved by a clever janitor.
I was just, yeah.
There was
agree.
a school, middle school, where the girls were putting lipstick prints on the mirrors in the bathroom. That was like the cool thing to do, put lipstick on and leave lip prints on the mirror. And so the janitor started complaining because he got tired of cleaning the mirror. And so the principal decided to have a meeting with the girls. They all met in the bathroom with the janitor. He explained how difficult it was to clean this off. And the janitor was going to demonstrate this, so he took, the janitor took the squeegee and dunked it in the toilet and then cleaned the mirror. Nobody put their lips on that mirror.
Basic principles of parenting.
And then also, there is a third option. There's private schools that you can send your kids to as well. So it's not just public schools and homeschool. There are private schools if you want to research that.
Okay, thank you. I think, Janice, thank you very, very much.
Yeah.
Let's give Janice a nice round. Thank you so much. A couple of things, and it's just like, just a couple of comments. Right now we do have public school or homeschool. But you do have, like Janice was saying, you can make pod schools. You can get a group of people together that decides that they want to homeschool together. And that happens. Those are options. But what it takes is it takes initiative. It takes, who's going to do that? Are you going to be able to teach a bunch of kids? Are you willing to teach a bunch of kids? The key here, and school choices is one way to help. But school choice and getting the tax dollars that go to there is going to take some time. It may take a year. Will we get legislation passed this next time around?
Good chance.
Maybe.
Got some new Senate members.
Yeah. So, you know, the thing we have to do is keep track of our legislators. We have to push things, okay? One thing else that I want to make, that lead site that the Idaho Freedom Foundation has, look on it. Look on it on a computer, because you look on it on the phone, it's a little hard. It also shows reserve funds that the school district has. Idaho Falls School District has like $32 million in the reserve in their rainy day fund. Bonneville County School District 93 has like 38 million. Boise, I think, has $151 million. You start hearing that the schools are broke. They got quite a piggy bank. They also, what that site tells you is, yeah, what's the salary of the teacher, but what's the salary of the administration? Okay, the administrators are making 3, 4, 5 times what the teachers are. So giving more money to the schools does not mean it's going to get to the teacher or that it's going to get to the children and help the children. And that's where we have to pay attention to these things. Proposition 1, vote no. Okay? That's a simple question on that one there. Okay? So, you need to pay attention to those things. Yes, Dorothy?
Idaho Freedom Foundation sends out information of what they were doing. Maybe you all got it in the mail. Wayne Hoffman could use, if you want a place to put some good money, donate it to the Idaho Freedom Foundation.
Right. Did you everybody hear that? Is that Idaho Freedom Foundation sent out a lot of good stuff, and if you support them, obviously donate to them. I just want to make some more comments real quick, because I like to. Janice is absolutely right about the swamp. And amazingly so, shockingly so. I didn't know about how deep the swamp was. I didn't even know how sticky it was and everything until, you know, this last fall. And we went and saw the special session back then. And it was so blatantly obvious. So blatantly obvious of how bad it was. And that's caused me to become more passionate and do a lot more things that we have done, that we're doing. It is, and again, it is here also. It's in Idaho Falls, the city of Idaho Falls. It's in the county. Okay. The Good Old Boys, Good Old Girls Club is very prevalent. That, and we'll get back to where my first real comment was, is everybody needs to get involved. Library districts, cemetery districts, every elected position has an impact. Water districts, you'd be surprised at the influence. A comment was made, actually last night at our meeting, we had a county commissioner at Stand Up for Idaho, and a comment was made, and there was some questions about annexations. And can the city just annex properties without the county permission or county knowledge? The answer was yes. Okay, well, what can an individual do about that if they don't want to be annexed in? Well, the comment was, well, one lady mentioned to me, she said, well, I went and talked to the city and they said you had no choice. You're going to get it. But then on the flip side, previously the commissioner said, you know what, there's like even a donut hole where you have a little bit of county property, about 4 properties inside the county that's inside, that is surrounded by city property. The city is not going to tell you that you don't have to be annexed. You can fight things. You just have to not take no for an answer or assume that that person that is telling you really knows what they're talking about. Okay? They may believe, but that's not necessarily the case. All these elected officials, they're not our leaders, they are elected officials. Pay attention to them. If they start doing things that you don't agree with, start a recall petition. It may or may not work, but the first thing it will do is it will put them on notice that you're paying attention. And their behavior will change. And you know what? The second time they do it, and the second recall petition you do on them, you may win, and you may get them out. But also that recall petition can be used against them the next time they decide to run, if they decide to run. It's up to us to hold them accountable. If we don't hold them accountable, then we only have ourselves to blame. And if you don't like what's happening on your school board, you've had a school board member that is doing something that you don't like, you think is wrong, put a recall petition in. If your superintendent is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, recall the whole board, because that's who they work for. Hold the board accountable. If you don't, if you do nothing other than sit around and gripe about it, guess what? They don't care. You're not going to do anything. So become involved. I am an advocate about recall petitions. It puts them on notice. And so with that, I'll get off my high horse here. And I'll just say, Janice, thank you one more time. And thank you for everything that you've done. And your service to the state and to the citizens of the state. And we really admire you and we really appreciate your efforts. And again, everybody, I thank you for coming tonight. And please drive safe home and we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much.